I think eventually we're going to see that big moment where there's retail investors that become overnight, frankly, millionaires, or at least make six figures or whatever.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Next Big Thing HQ, where we interview founders and showcase startups raising capital via Reg CF. Today, we have a truly great guest, considered one of the OGs in the Reg CF space, Caleb Naysmith. Caleb, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk about equity crowdfunding, so happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. And for those of you who don't know, Caleb really got into the space in 2021? You started at Bazinga.
Yeah, early 2020 is kind of when I got into it, or late 2020, actually. It was kind of a totally by chance kind of thing. I think I was ticked off at the stock market one day. Some big company IPO'd, and I was like, all the money seems to be in the private markets. I was just thinking, is there any way to invest in startups? So I just kind of started Googling one day, and the first company I actually found was Seed Invest. And I was like, wow, this is great. I didn't know this existed. And then I started looking more, and I found Start Engine and Cofounder and so on. And I was pretty blown away just because it was one of those things where I'd see all these companies IPO and it's like, 60 billion. And here's all the people that made tons of money from it. And that seemed like to me at the time, and still believe that. So I was pretty much immediately hooked because it was one of those things where I was searching for this, found it, blown away, and just kind of been in it and loved it since. I kind of got more involved because after I discovered this, I was kind of looking for information about it. And nothing really existed. There really wasn't a lot of social media groups. All the equity crowdfunding based social media groups are for UK based equity crowdfunding portals and so on, like Seeders and the other one, something to do with Box or something. But they were all not US based equity crowdfunding groups. So I kind of just started them, and I didn't really expect too much out of it, but it kind of took off from there. That all started late 2020 and just kind of been going since. So.
And you started Democratizing Finance, which is a great newsletter. I recommend everyone check it out. I like how you highlight the startups, but then educational aspects too. So it's not just research newsletter. There's also educational aspects. And now you are the CMO and co-founder of Hubtas, which Hubtas is a Bloomberg meets PitchBook investment research platform for retail startup investors, which is awesome. I've been using that a lot lately because I've invested in 2 startups so far this year. I'm going to invest in more. And so that just always helps, just aggregating all the information in one area so you can research, saves a lot of time, and also shows a lot of metrics, that I wouldn't know to look at unless I've been in the game for a really long time. So you kind of talked a little bit about getting into the equity crowdfunding space. And it seems like the common thread with people getting into the space is the opportunity. People want the opportunity to be able to invest in startups before they go public. So when you look at that, how has that aspect, the opportunity changed from, let's say, 2020 to now 2024? Because it seems like there's more traction. The industry is growing. Have you seen that aspect change much at all?
Yeah. So, interesting, one of my first investments in equity crowdfunding ever was actually in Start Engine on Start Engine secondary back when, I had discovered it about the same time that they had launched their first round of it. They launched Start Engine secondary. They did it for a few months. Then I think they pretty much scrapped it in a relaunch. Now they have Start Engine Marketplace, and they're slowly relaunching Start Engine Secondary again. And I thought that was, again, just a super neat thing. I definitely think it's getting better. It sounds like, Republic's, they're working towards a secondary market. Start Engine's working towards a secondary market. WeFunder's kind of announced it. Nothing concrete to my knowledge, but I think secondary markets, the interesting thing with equity crowdfunding is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this stuff's already in the venture markets, but just making it work for the retail crowd has just been a big part of, finding that. So, there's a lot. I think they're doing better with the Start Engine Marketplace, in my opinion, has been great. It's exactly kind of what people want. Nearly every company is listed. You can sell kind of whatever your price is. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it's active enough where I see transactions getting completed every day. So I think that's a really big thing. Now, kind of as 2024 goes on, there's already been at least 2 IPOs for equity crowdfunding startups this year. So I think it's, on both sides, it's getting better, where you kind of have that liquidity for the people that maybe haven't seen an IPO yet, because it is a pretty rare occurrence, and they can see some liquidity back if they need it. But also, obviously the IPO is the big goal long term. And, as the stock market recovers, I think that's going to be huge. I think all the portals are moving in the right direction with it. There's still obviously work to be done, and there's still lots of logistical concerns, but it's definitely been a big move in the right direction. I think we've seen, like I said, there's 2 this year already happened. Fibrobiologics on Start Engine, they raised $5 million, went public like a week or 2 ago, and then there was one.
Is it Autonomics?
Yeah,
Autonomics Medical.
Yeah, so both of those huge IPOs, they're doing pretty well. So it's super cool to see those kind of things, because realistically, like the thing with equity crowdfunding is either it works and it's going to be a huge industry, or it doesn't. And because that's the thing, is if people see returns, they're probably going to keep reinvesting.
Yep.
And then it just makes sense. And venture capital's kind of already proved out that market. It's just we see higher quality deal flow, which we've seen a lot recently. I think it just continues to go and continues to spiral in an upward direction, whatever.
It's kind of like a flywheel. I see it as a flywheel effect, right? Where now more and more people get excited because they see returns, so they're going to want to invest more money into the market. It's going to grow the market. But you talked about liquidity, and I've always thought, liquidity is one of the big issues, that if you can create efficient secondary markets, it will help more people get involved and invest, because they don't have to wait 7 years to find out if they made a return or not, right? They can trade it in the secondary market. And, secondary markets are very big for private companies, like for SpaceX, for Stripe. They have a lot of those transactions taking place on Hubtas. So I do think that's a very exciting aspect to look forward to 2024, 2025 in the equity crowdfunding industry. How about what excites you the most when you look forward? And then what are you surprised the most when you think about at the very beginning of your journey getting into the equity crowdfunding space to now?
Kind of like I said, where with equity crowdfunding, it either works or it doesn't. I think one of the things that, everybody's still kind of waiting for is their, kind of like crypto moment where it exploded all of a sudden. It became this big thing almost overnight. And realistically, in order for that to happen, it's going to be one of those things where somebody's made, a ton of money, a company IPOs, it does well. The next Apple, the Microsoft, the whatever. I think there's a lot of potential there for several companies, up and coming companies, to be that success story. I think portals in general, like some of the top portals, will kind of be that story. There's, the Boxicles of the world that, have already reached that mainstream attention, where like Elon Musk uses one as a guest house, or, you just have these companies that it's making its way into like mainstream, like household names. And these aren't just niche companies that, may or may not make. It's things that people talk about and have large followings now, and, bigger brands and all that kind of stuff. So, I think once we hit that moment, it's going to be one of those things where, there's always going to be a roller coaster for any industry. But I think we continue to see strength going into 2024, just due to the macroeconomic environment of everything. Mm-hmm. But, I think eventually we're going to see that big moment where there's retail investors that become overnight, frankly, millionaires, or at least make 6 figures or whatever. I mean, realistically, even with, for example, Atlas Motors, I know it, and now it's called New or something. It was one of those, like, it's a weird success story in a way, because when they IPO'd, it was a $1 billion company there for a couple days. And realistically, somebody sold at a massive valuation and saw 1,000 times their investment or whatever. It was, I wrote some article on it, but for a couple of people that sold, they became overnight millionaires. Now everybody else still was left holding the bag. And that's kind of the thing you have to balance there, because a lot of these companies raise too much money and then IPO without valuation to back it. And then, they get shorted into oblivion. But, once a company IPOs that can actually sustain their valuation, doing 100 million in revenue at a few $1 billion valuation, or they raised at a $10 million valuation at some point. Mm-hmm. Somebody that invested a few grand, 100x's their money, and suddenly somebody just went and now they can buy a house, they can reinvest.
Changes their life, right?
And I think eventually we'll see that. You heard there's hundreds of crypto millionaires out there. I don't like comparing equity crowdfunding to crypto, but it's an interesting, relevant cycle that a lot of people have followed recently, where a decade ago it was this niche thing that kind of boomed out of the post 2008 crash. And it went from, oh, it's only used by criminals. Oh, it's some niche thing. Oh, it's nothing. It's worth fractions of a penny. And then it was like, oh, this is actually something. And, it's, oh, look, here's a whole bunch of people that made tons of money out of it. Now it's a currency for certain states. And obviously there's plenty of scams that, tons of totally fraudulent people and that abuse that system. But I think kind of where equity crowdfunding has the advantage is it's regulated from the start. It's, got a complete infrastructure already there. I mean, again, these are backed by securities laws. And so there's no guessing where, the SEC sat on it for a decade trying to regulate it. And then now all of a sudden they're trying to clean up all the fraud. It's like, well, if you commit fraud in this instance where you lie in a securities Form C or something, you're going to jail.
You're going to get,
There's no room for argument there. They have to file yearly audits. There's lots of, sure, there's always going to be bad actors. We've already seen that, in several instances. I've had some, that I've written about who have not been fond of it. And, you're going to have that. But I think from the get-go, it's just substantially better already. And, I think we're going to see a similar market cycle where equity crowdfunding goes from this niche thing to, as we're already seeing, it's growing in popularity. It's becoming, more talked about in the mainstream cycle of things. And then there's going to be, some big moment where a lot of people make a lot of money. It gets blasted everywhere. People jump in, I'm sure hype cycle collapse, bigger hype cycle, who knows, but it's just even with like the stock market again, where there's just a whole infrastructure there. And, for example, that's one of the things Hubtas is trying to do is, for the stock market, you have Bloomberg and Benzinga, and you have all these news publications, Yahoo Finance, you have all these tools that people use to invest in. Just within the infrastructure there, you have billion-dollar companies, and, it's collectively trillions of dollars in assets being traded and invested and so on. And the private markets are growing consistently. Venture capital is tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars collectively everywhere. And it's becoming more and more prominent as you get retail investors involved. And then eventually, again, I think Hubtas is going to be one of those things where, when you refer to, just like you refer to Bloomberg for the stock market news and investing, you're going to refer to Hubtas as the go-to investing tool and news source and so on. And I think that's kind of where we're going. I'm excited for it. I mean, we see more positive news by the day.
So talk to us more about Hubtas. You're the CMO, co-founder of Hubtas. So how do you see the vision for Hubtas going forward over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting story, kind of how I joined Hubtas. I started the whole equity crowdfunding thing, like I said, in like late 2020 with basically like my Medium profile and a Facebook group. Because I started the Facebook group, then I was like, we need stuff to talk about in order to grow the group. And so I started the Medium profile, started my own blog, and then used that as engagement for the group. And then, it really took off mainly because there was just no competition on Google or like SEO for equity crowdfunding stuff. I mean, I was pretty much it. And so my stories, I'd write them, and there's a ton of search volume. And, I was the only one doing it. And so it really blew up pretty quick. And the same thing with the Facebook group. There was no other equity crowdfunding Facebook groups. There still really isn't. I pretty much manage all of them, or, I'm part of all of them. So that just blew up really quick. I kind of outgrew Medium pretty quick and then started democratizing .finance. Still kind of do it, but, discovered Hubtas. I joined Hubtas, I met Ashna just kind of by chance, and, we really hit it off, and we kind of pitched this idea of merging the two because I saw they have like a phenomenal platform, in my opinion. I wouldn't have joined it if I didn't think they had a great platform. And I think they really do have the best platform on the market. And so I kind of was like, hey, I could join, I can use my audience, going to help build Hubtas, and you guys have a great product. I think I can really help bring this to the next level. And, they were on board as well. So we went through all that. I joined as their CMO, loving it. Tim and Ashton are both amazing. They are super passionate. And we built Hubtas, the retail investors startup investing platform, in mind. It's $10 a month. It is accessible to everybody. We think, that's the thing is we help you make one good investment or help you avoid one bad investment. You've already paid for your subscription for life, pretty much several years over, and then we news at no cost and just lots of great perks and it's a phenomenal platform in my opinion. Kind of where we see it going is a lot of what you already see with like the mainstream platforms like Bloomberg, for example, for equity crowdfunding startups. We want a comprehensive news platform where if people think like, oh, what's going on with equity crowdfunding, you go to, media.hubtas.com. When you are thinking about investing in a startup, you want to find new deal flow, you want to vet companies, you want to, kind of get that second opinion of sorts, then you go to Hubtas, you can constantly see new things. We're working on a lot of really awesome features, for the B2C side of things. So it's one of those kind of stay tuned. But
when will we hear these announcements?
Well, if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll hear them pretty much right as soon as they roll out. One of the things we recently launched was Hubtas GPT, kind of jumping on the AI train. It's not a super hard feature. So it's just, a cool thing to have where it's difficult to write endless guides and classes, but we trained an AI bot on all of our equity crowdfunding data and it's constantly updated. So you can go on there and kind of ask it whether basic or advanced questions. You can ask it to kind of interpret data based on a company and, almost talk through it. If you don't have, a social media group to go to really talk about it, or you're not getting the answers you want, you can go there and just kind of feel it out with a completely objective AI bot that can say, hey, this is what this data tells me. And there's no, I like and dislike companies for various reasons, but I'm human. There's no emotions in it. So it's kind of a psychological thing there where if this thing is like, hey, there's a lot of red flags here, it's not saying that because, it doesn't like somebody or, it's just objectively, that's just how it is. And so, one of the main things we're kind of looking is integrating the news site and the main Hubtas site. So, you go on to hubtas.com, you have a portfolio, you follow companies, and then one of the biggest things right now in the equity crowdfunding space that I think is an issue is actually keeping people informed and engaged. So startups, they will launch their equity crowdfunding raise, and a lot of them do really well as far as, investor relations and so on. But, it's very difficult to kind of, follow a company. They might raise on several different platforms or they just don't really tout their wins as much as they should. So, I think it's a really good thing. For example, Sonic just concluded their raise and now they're going on Shark Tank at the end of this month. So you go on Hubtas.com, you follow Psionic, and then you're going to get your own news feed. You're going to get emails. You're going to kind of build this platform where you're constantly following your news. You're kind of getting our take on it. You're getting the up-to-date information and everything, and kind of, it'll be something that people, regularly check and come back to. And, it's going to be your go-to information source for all things equity crowdfunding. And that's kind of where we see it. Another big thing is we're working kind of on the B2B side, less pertinent specifically for, retail investor audiences. But just like Bloomberg and Benzinga and everybody else license their data for other companies, we're also looking to be kind of an infrastructure for a lot of the other big players in the equity crowdfunding space. So, not only are we going to be kind of that go-to platform for consumers, but also businesses and kind of helping build the infrastructure out because, again, we think this is going to be a really big industry and it's going to continue to grow. And so we want people to come to us for their investment news and information and so on, but also help build out other companies and kind of build out the infrastructure that, these companies run on.
And I think that's great that they can track the company's updates on just one central platform instead of having to check the company's LinkedIn, then check the company's Twitter, then check, some other website like Yahoo Finance. Just having one central location saves a lot of time. It's easy to track, and that helps the investor out so much because they can then follow and know exactly where they think their investment stands. But talking about investments, what do you look for when you invest in startups? Because you've invested in over 30 startups. So what do you look for? Common three factors that you're like, these are the three most important factors when I'm going to evaluate and decide whether or not to invest in a startup?
Yeah, my thesis has kind of changed over time. There's certain, maybe red flags or something that I won't invest in. There's some like basic principles, especially recently. I'm not much for like investing in ideas where somebody says, hey, we have this great product we think we're going to launch next year. That just adds a completely unnecessary level of risk for me. There's a balance there.
You want them to have an MVP, right?
Yeah. That's the thing is, I at least have something that shows me that I'm not kind of investing in a pipe dream. I don't want the risk to be, can they get their product to market? You can always improve your product, make it better down the line. Mm-hmm. But if a big risk factor is, can you even build this thing that you want to build? That's just too much for me. Once you get kind of that next step, I do like some pretty basic principles of, traction and profitability and all that kind of stuff. But it's not necessarily a deal breaker one way or the other. It just depends kind of on, I guess, just more of like a holistic approach. I keep an open mind going into it. There's certain things I don't invest into. For example, alcohol has never been a big one for me just because there's just no differentiating factors usually.
Yep. Extremely competitive.
Yeah. Just massively competitive market, super oversaturated. Like, sure, there's going to be successes. It's just nearly impossible to predict the right ones.
Which one? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's just what differentiates one from the other. It might be a trend. It might be the right marketing approach. But, if you're just giving me a landing page, it's really hard for me to say, you know what, this is a winner right here. And once an alcohol company IPOs, their valuation is not, several multiples of their revenue. It's usually like 1, 2, maybe 3 times their revenue, unless they're just expected to explode or something. But it's, they're not getting a really huge premium. And with equity crowdfunding, the valuations tend to be on the more expensive side, where you might see an alcohol brand with 10 times revenue that may or may not be profitable, if not even more expensive than that. And it's just, when you look at the upside there, it's just not great. Is this company going to succeed? Who knows? But the other side of that is, if they succeed, how much money am I realistically going to make? Many of the biggest alcohol brands out there are, sure in the billions, but, it's not, hundreds of billions with Apple. And it's just
right. The upside is limited, right? It's a capped upside. How important is the founder and the team when you look at investing on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would generally say it's one of the more important things. Because I will say, like, if I'm getting, bad vibes or whatever you want to call it from the founder, that's, an instant 10 where I'll just be like, I won't even think about it. I'll say, you know what, no chance of even touching this. Could be the greatest company in the world, but this guy is sketchy. I would say it's probably one of the most important, things you can realistically do, because like I said, I invest in companies that are more than just an idea. But at the end of the day, it's like a startup is just kind of a bank account with a few people looking to make something happen. And the driving force behind that is just vital. That person's intentions is their goal to, I want to keep raising money so I can sit on a nice 6-figure salary and I don't really care if I get a return. Or is it like, I want to really make something out of this. I want to bring the investors with me. I talk with a lot of the founders that I invest in pretty regularly. Me and Jeff Anderson over at Legion M, I talk to him pretty regularly about what he's doing, and he's just a phenomenal guy. And I invested in his company solely because I think he's an awesome guy. I know his history, and I know, all the controversy around Legion M. And in some ways it's revolutionary, in other ways it's, pretty basic. You're investing in film and so on. The innovative aspect is the crowd and equity crowdfunding aspect, which again, I'm a huge supporter of equity crowdfunding and, the power of the crowd. So I totally believe in that vision. But I also just, like I said, I think he's an amazing guy. I think his intentions are well. I think he's incredibly intelligent. So, I think that alone, coupled with a scalable idea and a good, business model and a good idea and so on is, makes for a good investment. On the other hand, I've seen, some companies that I'll look into them, and it's like my favorite one so far is City Zenith or whatever, where
Yeah.
I was looking into
Zenith Home, right?
What was it?
Zenith Home? Or is it Zenith Home?
City, or
Okay,
Zenith Home is one, and that's a different story. The company I'm talking about is City Zenith, and I looked into the company because it actually probably 3 or 4 years ago raised a ton of money, and their founder, like I wrote a report on it. Their founder, well, first of all, I saw like some screenshots on LinkedIn that was this guy was just saying some like awful things to another person I know in the equity crowdfunding space, like threatening him severely and some other questionable things. And I took those screenshots. I looked into his company, and it was just packed with red flags. And I wrote a report on it, and like a lot of former employees came to me and were just, saying like, "Hey, this guy is a terrible human." And I wrote that story, and the guy sued me and sued the other guy about like that I got the screenshots from. And, long story short, the guy like committed perjury, and now he fled the country and is like wanted by several organizations. Like, it's just those kind of things where it's like the red flags alone of the things I found when writing the story are enough to make me not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But, either way, if you can, that guy's just uninvestable because he's just an awful person. He's in it for himself. He is not here for you. And you could invest in the next Uber, and then when it IPOs, you get screwed because the founders have a lot of power, especially being majority stockholders, to, structure things in a way to, mess up anybody that, they don't want to succeed. They could dilute you into oblivion and really just hose you. If anybody's watched the story about the rise of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, where it's like, you see the deposition, it's like, how much was Mark Zuckerberg diluted? 0%. How much were you diluted? 99%. It's like, and they can do that kind of stuff, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you won't know until you are sitting there holding the bag, and you thought you were about to see this massive payday, and in reality, you get totally hosed. And so if the founder is not in, a bad person, frankly, then it's just uninvestable immediately. So a lot of the founders tend to fall in that middle area where, sure, you have some previous exit founder who built some $1 billion brand, and, they're backed by these huge players with millions of dollars. And, it's like, that's a no-brainer. And then there's the other side of things where this is just, some fraudulent, terrible human looking to scam people and has a history of it. And, but most people tend to fall in the middle area. They're pretty strong. They've got a good idea. They've got the accolades. Maybe they have a degree. Maybe they had a small exit. Who knows? But it's one of those like, okay, this person doesn't have any red flags. They seem like a good person. They've kind of, their head's in the right place. It could go either way, realistically. And so you almost can't make a decision off of those. You can say like, hey, this is, good enough to invest in if everything else checks out. So, that's why I'm hesitant to say, it's a full-blown 10, but it definitely can be.
Well, I want to do a couple rapid questions. First one is, what is your big, bold prediction for 2024 in the equity crowdfunding space?
I'm just going to say, I think it's going to be a really great year. I think we're hitting all-time highs for, amount raised. I think we're going to see some really cool product launches. I think we're going to see some big IPOs. I don't know what companies those are going to be.
Possible,
I think
maybe?
we're going to see some coming out of the woodworks. I know, for example, there are like Start Engine and Boxable and whatever. I think they're in a good position, but I don't see them IPOing this year just based on where their specific goals and timelines are and so on. But I do think they're going to both have great years. I think we see some companies kind of coming out of the woodworks, though. And, for example, Fibrobiologics. I think Fibrobiologics, for example, probably IPO'd too early because they don't have enough revenue. But, even still, I think we see some that do. I have a few sleepers in my portfolio that maybe they IPO. I know SolGuard, for example, I invested, smaller company. They're doing $30 million in revenue last year. I know they're killing it this year. So, I could, for example, I'm sure there's some sleepers out there that I don't know about that, I really think we'll see some really strong year personally.
And next question, advice to younger self. What would you tell your 22-year-old self?
I'd give them the answers of the book. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I mean, sure, you could, look at, regrets and anything, but overall, I would stay the course, believe in yourself, keep doing what you're doing. Cause, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at and what I'm doing and kind of how it's all going. I think everything's really falling in the line. So, so far can't complain. Sure, maybe I give them the winning lottery tickets or, buy NVIDIA stock.
Yeah.
But, I mean, as far as my life goes, I can't complain.
And last and final question, what is the most influential book that you have read?
It's a good question. I just graduated law school in May.
Congrats.
And I had a lot for that, but I have not done a lot of what I'd like to call, entertainment reading. I guess like I need to get back into it, but honestly, it's
we can save it for next time.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's not really an influential book. I mean, so I'm, military. I'm in the Army and deployed right now. So I read a lot of like history and, specifically things related to the Army and everything. So, I've read Start With Why by Simon Sinek and like those kind of books. I get mixed emotions by them just because, on the one side, there'll be good ideas, but on the other side, I feel like a lot of them will say stuff without really saying anything. Oh, I think it's called Unbroken or something like that.
Oh, Louis Zamperini.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. That's a great book.
That kind of stuff. One, it's just like, whatever you're going through, you can make it through it because, I mean, it's like you read about that kind of stuff. It's just
like 100 Days at Sea or something like it's something absurd. And it's like, you got to get to the point to where you got to get your own food. So how do you do that?
Yeah. And then you go through all that. And then you're kept in, a Japanese war prison for however long. And, it's like you just went from bad to almost worse.
Worse, right?
How do you even get through that? And, and that comes out of it, I'm sure based on kind of like the stuff I looked at after I read that, like almost unscathed and just, grateful that he was able to come through it. And I feel like it's just one of those things where it's like realistically, whatever you're going through, you can really get through it. I think like that kind of stuff is, super meaty. And you can just learn a lot from it. You learn about World War I and World War II and so on in the history books and what happened. But then you hear like one person's recount of it. And especially, for example, I'm in the Middle East right now and, we're not at war, but you can learn from that kind of stuff, I feel like. So
and draw a lot of power from it.
That's awesome. The historical aspects of it, kind of meaning and the overarching message behind it and everything. So
there's a picture in the back of the book and he's 90 years old and still skating on a skateboard. And you think, how? But he has the biggest smile on his face. And, so yeah, that book, I thought that book was very powerful reading that. And I think about that every now and then and just kind of get some more meaning, some more power from it. But Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your service too. We appreciate you. Stay safe. And we appreciate everything that you've done coming on. And also really excited with Hubtas. Looking forward, excited to use it for my next investment and excited to track my companies that I invest in on Hubtas. So thank you for that too.
Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to, keep watching your content and everything you're doing here with equity crowdfunding. Super excited. I think, equity crowdfunding is going to be huge and I'm glad that you're making content for it and making going to be a big part of it. So thanks for having me on and
We appreciate it. And for all the viewers out there, we'll see you next time on Next Big Thing HQ. So long. Bye-bye.